Welcome to Retro Scale Modelling. My next build is going to be this Italeri Crusader Mk.II tank. Now this is a British tank. It comes with 5 figures, scale is 135, and there's an option for 3 different types of decals. So this is going to be straight out of box build, and what's in the box, we have the decal sheet there. The instructions. I haven't looked at these yet, but they look fairly standard. Just a quick glance at them. Here we go on the different options, painting options there. I'll probably do the camel one. As I said, I'm not going to be doing the figures. I'll keep them for another project. I'm not putting this in a diorama, so I don't see the point of doing the figures. The screws themselves, all nicely packed. There's the screw for the figures, for the hull of the tank, and little bits and pieces, wheels there. Another rubbery plastic track, and side skirts there for the tank. So it's a very simple basic kit, but it should be quite enjoyable to do. So I'll go and get this primed and we'll make a start. I've primed them in grey primer, and I'm using now Revel Aquacolor 17 African Brown for the wheels, and this will be the main colour for the tank. I was going to do the camel version, as I said in the intro, but in the end I thought I'd just keep it simple, just something nice and gentle to start off the new year. The first part of the construction is for the suspension, and as you can see there's 2 little location points it just hooks into, and the sloping raised bit of plastic there helps guide it in, so it's very simple to assemble. I also put some on the sidewall as well. That was really just to show you that it can go both ways. It doesn't really matter. This side panel will go on over the suspension pistons there, and it just fits in quite easily. And now it's straight onto joining the 2 main halves, so the upper and lower part of the hull. This just sat in its cradle quite easily. There was no need for any modifications to get it to sit. Didn't really need any clamps either. I just held it for a couple of seconds for it to bond, and then it was onto the painting. And as I said, I'm using the Revel Aquacolor 17 African Brown for this. You may notice I'm painting in a circular motion here. If you haven't done so, you can look at my painting technique tutorial video to see why I'm painting like that. So now it's back onto the wheels, and it's time to assemble the wheels. There's a little sprocket that goes in the middle section of the wheels. Now you can glue this in position if you want, or you can just leave it free. It's entirely up to whoever is building it. The wheels can move if you wish them to move, but gluing them is a good option as well. Not that they will move a lot anyway once they're in position, but it may just give you a bit of peace of mind. So once it's the sprockets in, it's just a matter of marrying up the 2 halves of the actual wheel, and then one end, the shallower end, of where the axle pin goes, receives the hubcap. And the hubcap itself is quite a small little thing, and it just sits on there. And the wheels just push on. Now there's no need for any cement on this whatsoever, even if you're having it as a static model. They are a nice tight fit without having to put any force onto the actual wheel itself. I'm laying down Humbrol 113 Rust, and this is the base coat for the tracks. Now, a lot of people have different ways of painting these tracks. This is my preferred way. I put down a coat of rust, and then I will paint over that with Humbrol's 53 gunmetal. Now, I'm just slightly going over the rust colour with this. It gives it a bare metal look, and obviously a metallic-y look to the actual rubber track as well. The drive wheel and idle wheels are made up practically the same way as the main wheels, apart from the low sprocket on these. You just push the 2 halves together. Now these were actually quite tight to fit. I had to exert quite a bit of pressure to get them down to the position required. It was also the same case of putting them inside the hull. Again, I had to really push them in quite firmly. Luckily, I didn't bend the pins. So I've rested it overnight, and it's now time to do the main assembly. So first of all, the rear sections going on. This is the back vent. There's a little bit of giveaway on the drive wheel here. That was more of a mistake than anything else, but it did actually work out quite well for when I was fitting the tracks. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't cement the end parts of the track just yet until you've got everything in position on the end areas of your build. It just gives you that bit more of a wiggle room, let's say, to place all the smaller parts on. Fitting the track, like everything else with this kit, is quite simple. Once I got it into the runs, it was just a matter of folding it over and gluing the two halves into position. Now, if you're having a static model, a little tip here, add a little glue onto the bottom wheels as well, just so that the track will hold. You can't notice once the track's turned upside down and sitting on its wheels. It just gives that little bit extra grip, and you can leave it quicker and carry on with the next part of build instead of holding it there for say 5 minutes or so until it's all ready to be worked on again. I will say on this kit though, one track was larger than the other, which is a bit of a shame, but once it was sitting down, the tracks did droop a little bit onto the wheels like they should do, so it didn't really matter. The mud guards are next to go on. I had a little problem with the second mud guard going on. For some reason I couldn't get that to fit, and it required a little bit of filler for it to fit. It was going on at an angle for whatever reason. I looked at the mould and there was a slight slant to the cut, so maybe I just was a little bit over generous with the cut and cut it in a diagonal instead of a straight. I don't know. Either way, it was a simple fix with a little bit of filler. Next to go on was the collar for the turret, and then some of the compartment boxes which go onto the top of the hull. Sorry. These didn't have to be made up. They came with a solid unit. So once they're off the sprue and cleaned up a bit, it was just a matter of placing them on the body. The only compartment I really had to make up was the front gunner's position, and it was just a case of making up a little box, as you can see here, before I placed it on. Now you do have an option for some of these areas to be left open. There's parts in the kit that allow you to do that, but because I'm not using the figures, I'm having it all closed up. And now I'm putting on all the little things like the hooks and the cable buckles and things like that. Obviously, with being a 135, they are not large, but they're not small either. If you do a 172 tank or a 176, these things are absolutely tiny. So they're quite a comfortable size, but you still have to be careful to get them in the right position. I am putting the headlights in here. Obviously, there's two of them. They just sit in the little location point. There's a couple of extra armor plates that you have to place on as well, and this is one of them. There's one at the front, one at the back, and again they just sit against the actual hull with no issues to speak of. You may have to trim it down slightly, but it's easy enough to do. So when that's all done, it's time to put the lamp guards on, and these ones are just two U brackets on each side of the light. This is the locking rail for the extra piece of tank. If you're wondering why that's this colour, I didn't actually prime this part for some reason. Don't know why, but I'm placing everything on now, and I'll give it a quick coat of undercover with a brush before painting it the actual hull colour. So I'm building up now the exhaust system for the tanks. There's two of these, and first of all the housing. It's just a flat piece of plastic with some little hooks that go around down the side of the unit. And then it was the cradle to hold the extra fuel tanks. There's only one on this, and that just sits on the back where the air vent is, just latches over it. And then it's a little bit more work on the mudguards, and it's a retaining bar. There's a little box I'm placing in here. It's weird, it goes in at an angle, I don't understand it, but that's how the instructions say to put it in. There's tiny little handles and things to put on as well, so I'm doing all that on the rear of the tank. The main tone hook in the middle, that needs to be assembled before you can either assemble it, before placing it on, or assemble it while it's in situ. I don't know why it was in situ, just so that I knew exactly where it was going, and it gave me a little bit more areas to work on, so that it didn't go askew and out of shape while I was assembling it on the mat. So I thought it was a better idea to do it like this. Back to the exhaust systems, and first of all the support plates are going first, and then I'm using a little bit of cement on the contact point just in front of the ammo boxes and the actual plate. Then the exhaust just sits on top like so. Now you can assemble them beforehand, but it's easier to do it this way because then you get the exact correct positioning. The extra fuel tank's canister gets made up. That comes in a few parts. The two end parts of the cylinder, then the two halves of the cylinder. I tried assembling these with the two ends already in situ before I put the two halves of the cylinder together. It didn't quite work, so I had to take them out. But I did place the two handles on first and let them dry before I did this. This just gives you something to grab onto while you're trying to maneuver it into position. It then sits on the cradle that I placed in earlier on. There's a little latch that goes over the top that sits from the barrel to the actual tank. Let that semi-set, don't let that dry completely before placing it on. That way you can maneuver it into position a lot better. Next I'm making up the turret. Now this is straightforward as the tank main hull is. First of all, I'm putting on all the little brackets and latches that go on around the side. There's also a little searchlight that goes on the side here. Just be mindful in which direction that is pointing. I actually made it point the wrong way around initially, so I had to take it off and place it back on. And now for the top hatch. You can have this open if you wish. There's extra parts in the kit for you to do so. The two halves of the turret married up very well. Like the hull, I just needed a couple of seconds to hold for it to bond together. The rear storage block you have to make up yourself, but it's a simple box configuration, so it shouldn't challenge you whatsoever. And once it's on, it just sits on the back of the box. Make sure, look at the positioning though, because there is a couple of little brackets that's on top of that, and you don't want it to drop too low either. So then it's onto the underside of the turret, and then just finishing off the cradle. And this is just a little cuff piece of plastic that lines up with the other side, which is already formed. The gun mechanism is a fairly straightforward build. The only parts you really are joining is the mount to the actual barrel itself, and of course the little machine gun that I'm just placing in here. I will say though, the instructions did get some parts wrong. There was a whole panel on the instructions that didn't have any numbers, and there was a couple of illustrations that were slightly wrong. It was easy to work out just by looking at the part in the pictures, but if it's your first time around, you may want to study these parts a little bit more just to make sure you know what you're doing. But saying that, it went in quite easily to the actual mount itself before attaching it to the actual main turret. Last to go on the turret is the two aerials. There's one at the front, one at the back. The back one I had a little bit of trouble getting in the proper position. I kept on wanting to slant down a little bit. So I just had to trim it slightly so I was able to keep it upright. So next I'm going on to these armour skirts at the side. These were very simple to place in. However, I did have to use a few clamps just to hold it in place. I'm using Umbro 11 or natural wood to paint the stem of the spade here, and the blade is painted in 53 gunmetal. As an option whether you want to have it on or not. I personally like putting them on, but it's up to you. There's a couple of things that I painted which I decided not to put on. These weren't anything on the instruction. I'm not sure what they were for, but I painted them anyway. So now it's on to the main painting. So once more I'm using Revel Aquacolor 17 African Brown, and just putting the first coat on now. I will put a second coat on. I'll do that off camera, but it's only going to be in places because I want this tank to look worn. So the first coat is enough to give it that down look that I'm after. Next to go on is the rail on the side armour before I go on to painting the rest of the hull. I'm using Umbro 113 Rust, and this is for the exhaust pipes are going from the tank to the actual exhaust box. And then next to go on is one of the cables that just hooks on from the front to the rear of the tank. And now the spade is dry, that just goes on to the equipment box at the back of the turret. And lastly, to put on is the extra track that goes on. So you don't put this on until the end, until everything is painted, for obvious reasons, because you don't want to be painting over the track. The kit gives you enough spare track for you to have whatever configuration that you like with the spare track. So once that's all on, it's just a matter of twisting on the turret. So it's time to put the decals on. I'll slightly speed this process up a little bit. It's only decals as such. Decals can be very forgiving on the tank. It doesn't really matter if you're a bit rough with them, so don't worry if it's gone a little bit wrong for you. It's easy enough to fix and get away with. Well, this will actually bring the build to an end. This kit is a really good kit. It's quite an old kit, but I would really recommend it for beginners, medium, and of course advanced builders. Especially for beginners. If you've never built a tank before, this is a really good kit to start with. It's not too challenging. For the most part, everything's explained quite well in the instructions, apart from the mount for the main gun. But you need something to work out or you'll never learn. You know, that's my theory anyway. So I would say get yourself this kit. You can have a lot of fun with it. It's quite good. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out my channel for my other videos. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified of any updates that I make, including any new builds. Hit that like button and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.